Hey guys, I just want to do a video real quick. This is going to be a contest entry video, a video response, and it's probably going to be a little bit on the long side. I don't know why I said a quick video. Probably the only thing that's quick about it is I am using my webcam, so I do apologize. If you watch any of my videos and you recognize the video quality jumps from like widescreen HD to sometimes it looks a little blurry or fuzzy, or the frame rate's a little different. That's usually because my camera, for whatever reason, isn't charged or isn't cooperating with me, so I use my webcam sometimes for some videos. I'm coming to you today to do the contest entry for Rchattaway87, who just recently hit 100 subs. I will try to go as quick as I can, and I'll kind of explain what I'm doing for the contest, but for the most part, you'll have to kind of excuse me. I'm just really fatigued. I ran a half marathon today in like 40-something degree rain. It was miserable. And although that was a while back, the pain and the blah is just now kind of hitting me. Okay, so what I'm going to do, but I definitely want to get this out there before I forget about it, because he's a great guy and it's a good accomplishment to hit 100 subs in the time he did, so I definitely got to honor that. Okay, what we're going to do is he asked a question about my top 5 directed movies, and my understanding from that, I mean, I didn't want to confuse it, but I'll go ahead and just do it the way I took that to mean. It's not necessarily just my top 5 as much as like my top 5 movies that are directed in a way that the directing maybe is a big part of it. Okay, but before that, I want to show you a few things. Also, he did another thing where he wanted you to put your top 5 movies from 2000 to 2009. I'm going to do that really quick. I'm going to actually put that in the comments because that's the way the rules were, whatever. But I want to show these real quick, and then I'll put that in the comments also down below. But The Prestige, this is my favorite Christopher Nolan movie, and I know a lot of people like Dark Knight or Memento or whatever, but that's definitely my favorite is Prestige, so that's one of my favorite movies from 2000 to 2009. Zodiac, David Fincher is amazing. This is one of my favorite David Fincher movies. Adaptation, this is one of those movies that was Charlie Kaufman had written this, the screenplay or whatever, but this is probably one of my favorite things that he did, but as a screenwriter. That's just an amazing movie. American Splendor. I don't know if I know who the director is on this one or whatever, but this is an amazing movie that really stuck with me. These are all movies that I've watched just tons of times. It's just, I love them, And then Garden State. I wasn't a humongous Zach Braff fan by any means, but when Garden State came along, I definitely changed my feelings about him. I'm going to try to jump a little faster ahead. These will be my 5 movies, my 5 favorite directed movies, which I'll take that to mean like the directing position of those movies will be picked in these results, and it'll probably speak more on the director than just the movie in general. The first movie I'll bring out, which is actually one of my favorite movies, the Coen brothers had done Big Lebowski, and Big Lebowski is one of those movies where the characters seem really absurd, and I guess the good way to put it would be like very cartoonish. But you find a way to accept them as they are, and a lot of that has to do with the way that it's edited, and just every part of the dialogue is heavily influenced in, like, I guess what you would say, mannerisms that are not very typical, but yet at the same time the characters feel like somebody you probably know in your real life a lot of times. It's kind of weird to explain, but there's a certain way that the Coen brothers can make people like the dude himself right here. It's like a guy that can be a hero in this movie, yet at the same time he looks like one of those guys that he doesn't even want to get a job, or he doesn't want to get out of bed and even change into like clothes to start the day. He's probably like one of the laziest, like kind of worthless people, and at the same time the Coen brothers can make this guy into a hero. And that's just an amazing way to piece together a movie when you can make your audience care like that about your characters. The next one I'll talk about is it's a Joel Schumacher film, and I'm not a humongous fan of Joel Schumacher in general, but at the same time, it's like one of those movies where I was really kind of surprised by this. I was very blown away. I would say the best way to describe this is one of those seedy underbelly of the industry type movies, you know. But your character starts off at the beginning. Nicolas Cage's character is kind of a wholesome family guy, and having to experience all these things that he does, he ends up being tainted forever by what he'd seen. It's like the idea that you can't unsee something. And what makes this an important movie is, for the first time in a long time, somebody like Nicolas Cage, which isn't one of my favorite actors, I was very sympathetic for his character. And then also, this movie has a very interesting way of making you feel like you're the main character of the movie. You're, kind of innocent at the beginning, and then as time goes on, you can't unsee the things that you see. And even though you don't see that much, the way that it's directed and the way it's edited, the most horrific parts of it are in Nicolas Cage's reactions. When you see his face, when you see the dread in his eyes, when you see him turn his head away, like in disgust, that is kind of the feeling like all of a sudden you're so sympathetic for this character, you feel like that's what you've had to have done, It makes you feel like you want to turn your head or something like that, even though you don't really know what he had seen. And I think that's a really interesting way to experience a movie. I always felt like the most important movies that I've seen are the ones that seamlessly make me feel like I go from my life into the movie, and I completely suspend my disbelief. And not like you can suspend your disbelief and just believe the characters and trust in the story maker, but the complete process of forgetting you're a movie fan, forgetting how technically people do certain things in the movie, like the way I'm talking about that movie now. It takes me watching that a few times and thinking back to actually occur to me. While the movie's moving through, I don't think this is how they did this scene, this is how they did that scene like I normally do. Instead, at the end, I feel like I just stepped off, a ride at a theme park or something like that. All of a sudden, it just comes to a halt and the credits are rolling and you're just like exhausted, or you're over animated with excitement or fear or dread or whatever. I mean, you really felt like you went through that experience, and I think that's kind of important. The next one I'm going to talk about is Death Proof. I'm a big fan of Quentin Tarantino. I wouldn't necessarily say this is my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie, but this is definitely one of his works that really impressed me. It's the movie that made me feel like less is more, I guess, with Quentin Tarantino. And what I mean less is more is he doesn't need a humongous budget. He doesn't need to keep topping all of his movies with something extravagant. What he can do is he can set a whole bunch of people in a room and have them just speak. He can have them just say the words that he had actually designed, and written out and directed them to say it in a certain way. And you were just immersed into that dialogue. It's in his dialogue isn't very natural. It's an unnatural dialogue, yet it just wraps you up. So when you can actually cut back and forth between people's reactions, and you can show all those different things, if you can get your actors to actually say the lines in the way he intends them, because nobody really talks like that, I feel like, sometimes in real life, but yet it feels very natural for his movies. But yeah, Quentin Tarantino is one of my favorite directors, and that's probably one of the more impressive movies for his directing skills, because there are a few bigger action type scenes towards the end, but they're not humongous Hollywood action scenes. They're just kind of like bigger for that movie. For the most part, it's very basic. A lot of those places look like regular restaurants, regular bars, regular whatever, and just normal people sitting there shooting across a room. I mean, it wasn't very extravagant. and it's still amazing. The next movie I want to talk about is JFK, which is actually one of my favorite movies also. Oliver Stone has a way of telling stories where the information is so compact and so concise. He has a way with words too. The dialogue in these movies are amazing too. But one of the things I really like him is he's very proactive in the editing style. And for a movie as traditional as something like a biop, like the movie Nixon, or like this JFK, which is about the assassination of President Kennedy. He still does experimental movie editing styles, and he'll skip back and forth between color and black and white, and then you'll have just all kinds of weird sound effects, extreme close-ups, slow motion, all kinds of number of things are thrown in there just for effect. It feels very experimental, but in his hands, it feels very natural. And he got really big into this in the 90s. I didn't notice as much in the 80s, and then since then, it doesn't seem like it's as heavily, this way. I mean, W was kind of like that, but when you watch like Natural Born Killers, you kind of think, well, that's a crazy story. That's probably you're expected to see something like that. But JFK is the exact same way. So that's very, very interesting. It makes you feel the emotions that you normally would through somebody's reactions or somebody's dialogue. You can actually get that gut reaction just through interesting editing, which is amazing to me. Only Oliver Stone can really pull that off in an interesting way and not make it look like a college art film or something. The last movie I'll talk about is Videodrome. I'm actually a pretty big fan of David Cronenberg. And David Cronenberg has a very interesting style of doing movies. It's reminiscent of David Lynch and several other directors that do similar things like that. And I won't say several because there isn't a whole lot out there, not in mainstream cinema, if you can call this mainstream. But this is fairly mainstream. Cronenberg's made some mainstream movies like The Fly and Dead Zone and whatnot. A History of Violence. Eastern Promises were pretty mainstream, but his newer movies aren't the same as some of these movies that came out in the 80s and 90s. Most notably, this is probably the first one that jumps into that experimental film feeling. But for the first time, Cronenberg in Videodrome, I guess, had a true vision. And instead of worrying about the Hollywood system or box office numbers or whatever, he actually followed his vision from beginning to end. What's interesting about Cronenberg is he has a way of mixing the surreal with the real, or reality with at times fantasy, but could almost say reality and nightmare. He has a way of making drama movies or movies that just have a science fiction type element to them or whatever feel like horror movies. And I don't know that many directors that can give you that sense of horror in a movie that's not a horror movie. Videodrome is like that. He usually almost always starts off with a premise that takes you directly in reality into something odd. And as time goes on, the weird factor gets higher and higher. But it's so seamlessly happening that at times you forget where you started, and then by the time you get to the end, you can't believe that it's like, I don't know, he has this way of capturing almost like a dreamlike state, because you really never know what's going to happen next. It's very hard to guess where a Cronenberg movie is going to take you. It's definitely a journey. I wouldn't say it's for everybody. There's a lot of people that look at Cronenberg movies and to them, they're just like, I don't get it. And that's kind of the point. Cronenberg doesn't always want you to just get it. There's almost always something that's like an underlying theme. In this movie in particular, Videodrome, it's kind of like a connection between modern technology, or the amount of trust that we put into technology, or the amount of trust we put into media in general, like television, news, movies. What are all those different things, including it's a little ahead of its time, but it feels very like MTV-like, as far as there's a lot of quick edits, And I'm not speaking about the movie itself. I'm speaking about the television show, the videos that are inside the movie. It's kind of hard to describe. He's watching kind of like a television show, or he's watching like an underground video in this movie, and it's kind of like the generation we feel like we have now would have, related to that television or video series. It's very weird and it's underground, but there's lots of quick edits, a lot of unrelated things slammed together, kind of like that. I guess like, they say that the attention span's getting smaller. It's just like boom, boom, boom. You're just overloaded with imagery. And that he kind of predicted in a weird way that would happen, because it didn't feel like there was a lot of things like that back then. But yeah, there's a really interesting way that he can make, and you can actually tell by the front of this how weird this is. Actually a scene where you can actually see a guy is taking his head and pushing it into a TV. Things like that. The character leading up to that scene is just a guy, And then when you get to that part, you just feel like you're watching a horror movie, because you're seeing something so, nightmarish, or something so strange, or fantastical happen. But yeah. Okay, so Videodrome, enough about that. So that is my 5 for the contest, and then the other 5 I will list in comment. So if you guys have any thoughts on those movies, or in particular those directors, or anything else, yeah, leave a comment below or whatever. And congrats, Rchattaway87 on your 100 subs. All right, thanks.